Before we begin, let's walk through our webinar platform together. Each of the buttons at the bottom of your screen relate to sections in the ON24 console. The speaker view is where you will see our presenters throughout the webinar. The slide view is where you'll see the accompanying slides. Our poll questions will also appear in the slide area. Be sure to click directly on the slide to answer poll questions throughout the webinar. You can resize these widgets for a larger or smaller view. You may follow along also with a PDF version of the slides that can be found in the related content widget. The CPE criteria section details the requirements you must meet to receive full credit for CPE in this session. To obtain CPE, you must do two things. First, be on the live webinar for at least 50 minutes, and second, respond to 3 of the 4 polling questions that will appear throughout the presentation. You can track your viewing progress in the Earn CPE widget on your screen throughout the webinar. By registering for today's event, you will automatically receive an email after 24 hours with a link to download the slides and a link to view the recording. Additionally, if you meet all the criteria and qualify for CPE, a link to your CPE certificate will be in that email as well. Please remember that it does take 24 hours for that email to be automatically generated, so look for it sometime tomorrow afternoon. For CPE-related questions, please reach out to cpe@yptc.com. In the related content section, you can access any accompanying materials for this webinar. This includes a PDF copy of the slides and many times will often include related resources. Reactions from our audience throughout the webinar will float along the console screen. Use the Q&A section to ask questions directly to our speakers throughout the presentation. In the speaker bio section, you can find more about our presenters, including their contact information. If you need technical assistance, please use the help button below. Many times, technical issues can be resolved by opening the webinar in Google Chrome or refreshing your browser. Finally, the evaluation button contains our post-webinar evaluation survey. Here is where you can share your commentary and feedback on the presentation. We hope you enjoy our free webinar. Now, let's get into today's topic. All right, hello everyone, and welcome to Nonprofit Next. Trends, Tech, and Financial Resilience. Thank you all so very much for joining us. Your participation and feedback truly inspire us, and a very special welcome to all of our first-time attendees. So before we get into the conversation today, just a quick intro to who we are. Your Part-Time Controller, or YPTC, specializes in nonprofit financial management with over 30 years of experience in accounting, reporting, data visualization, and best practices. We serve clients nationwide, now also including Chicago and the Pacific Northwest, and offer remote services as well. My name is Carly McIntyre, and I will be moderating today's panel discussion. I support YPTC's training department by creating internal and external trainings, just like the one you're watching right now. And one of my all-time favorite things about my job is being able to connect with and learn from some of the top experts in the nonprofit world. As I mentioned on the previous slide, while our focus is nonprofit financial management, we've attracted a team that helps us shine even beyond that. And I'm so excited to introduce them to you before we get into the conversations. We have Christine Chaco coming from Philadelphia with us today, Nicole Frasina from our New York market, and then Derek from our Philadelphia office as well. And these are all experts that have been featured on one or more of our webinars this year already. So you'll get to hear more from them later. But team, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your expertise. And just a few quick reminders from the video that did just play. For the webinar, we will be using poll questions, and those are going to appear directly where you see the slides. If you can't see the slides right now, go ahead and refresh your web browser. That always helps. We'll get to our first poll in just a second, and when we do, be sure to click submit when you're finished answering the question. You can track your progress in the Earn CPE widget, and then any questions that you might have about CPE and your eligibility, feel free to direct those to cpe@yptc.com after the webinar. And then finally, while this is a free webinar, we pack so much value into the next hour. And so therefore, my invitation for you would be to pay attention. Practice monotasking for once this week, right? Your brain is going to thank you. Today's conversation is all about reflections and looking ahead to what's next for nonprofits. We will identify key developments from 2025 and, using the expert insights from our panelists, apply this knowledge to inform planning and strategy for 2026. And if you're joining us today, then you're likely going to resonate deeply with what we're talking about. That said, we want to hear from you. Which of the trends that you've seen, how it's playing out at your organization, and what questions that you still have. So drop all of this in the Q&A. We'll address as many as we can throughout the next hour. And while we'll officially end for CPE purposes at the top of the hour, we will likely stay on for up to 15 minutes or so after today's session to answer anything else that you would like to know. So stick with us, be present, be engaged, and let's get into it. So I want to take a moment to reflect on the journey that we've shared this year and how YPTC's mission to help as many nonprofits as possible has truly guided our every step. So this feeds into our every action, our every interaction, including these monthly webinars. We understand that there's been so much happen during the year that's out of our control. There's legislative and governmental funding shifts, rapidly expanding AI tools, rises in service demand and costs, and though today we'd like to focus on how to take all of this uncertainty and turn it into opportunity. Our speakers today will refer back to many of our timely and relevant sessions, our webinars from this year. And so check out the related content widget, and you can find all of the ones mentioned on our website, including and in the related content widget as well. I'd like to peel back the curtain of our approach within YPTC a little bit for you too. In times of uncertainty, we say control what you can control and let all the other noise go. This is a very simple yet very powerful statement that goes a long way in today's fast-paced and loud world. It's something that our CEO, Jennifer Oliva, and our executive team have been sharing and emulating. And it's something that I come back to consistently in my own life. So I wanted to drop it here just in case you needed the reminder today too. So what are things we can control? It's our mindset and our actions. So we're going to get a view of both the intangible and the tangible aspects of this today, and our presenters are going to share a lot about it. So with that, Christine, Nicole, and Derek, you have all been directly supporting and influencing our nonprofit clients. Not only that, but I've personally seen how you each exemplify the control what you can control mindset, and I'd really love to share your insights with our audience today. So starting with Christine, can you please tell the audience who you are and what your focus is here at YPTC?
Yeah, thanks, Carly. So my name is Christine Chaco. I am a technology associate in our Client Technology Solutions Group, and I help our clients implement tech around their operations, around their financial management, like accounting system conversions, app integrations, and a lot more. And all of these systems now have AI components, of course, so that's part of what we focus on as well. And I've also been part of the group at YPTC leading trainings on AI and what it can mean for nonprofits.
Thank you, Christine. How about you, Nicole?
Yes, hi. So I'm Nicole Frazina. I'm a manager here in the New York market. I work directly with our clients and staff to help meet the goals related to each engagement. I'm helping the clients and our staff see the bigger picture, and at times I'm coordinating with my colleagues on this panel today to assist in the work we're providing for each of our clients.
We're lucky to have you, Nicole. And Derek.
Thanks, Carly. I'm Derek Dreyer, and I lead YPTC's Government Funding Department. My role, in brief, is to help our clients find and apply for sources of institutional funding, and to serve my colleagues as a source of information and advice about government and foundation grants.
Amazing. Thank you, guys. And once again, thank you for being here with us. So with that, we're going to go directly into our first polling question. So we want to know from you, which trend or development, we'll be talking about all of these today, has affected you and your organization the most this year? And as we're waiting for the results to come in, I'd like to get our panelists' vantage points. So what are some of the most significant changes or challenges you've observed in the sector this year? Christine, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so in 2025, the big change we saw is that AI is really helping people be more productive on the individual level. There's a lot of individual use of AI for individual tasks, and that got a lot more powerful with the introduction of GPT-5. That happened in August, and then along with other newer generation models like Gemini 3. So now that the tech that is available is a lot more powerful, people are really able to do a lot more with these AI models. And also, as it's getting more advanced, it's becoming more affordable, more accessible, and AI is now being built into everything. So as that happens and the proliferation of AI grows, the need for training grows also. So we've been out, talking with our communities, teaching people how to use AI responsibly and productively, how to understand the basics of how it works and why and how they can use it to really help their workflows and their organizations.
How about you, Nicole?
Yeah, this year, it almost felt like COVID again, 2020 again, right? It was all about being adaptable and being able to shift gears at a moment's notice. One of the challenges I've seen this year was revenue and the ever-changing landscape around funding sources. And another challenge is the high turnover in the executive level positions, such as executive directors, CFOs, development directors. But on a positive and in response to these challenges, I've seen increased collaboration between nonprofits, like mergers. I've seen nonprofits get creative with their revenue sources. We'll discuss more of that later on, but it's been an interesting year.
It sure has, hasn't it? All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the results here and check out the results. It looks like definitely the top one is uncertainty in federal funding. And so, Derek, I'd love for you to speak on that a little bit here.
Yeah, thanks, Carly. I'm certainly not surprised by that result, although I would have selected letter D, all of the above, because I've encountered all of these issues this year with clients. To say that 2025 was an eventful year for nonprofits would be the understatement of the year. But we're not going to spend too much time looking in the rearview mirror today. We want to focus on trends we see emerging for the coming year and hopefully also identify some steps that nonprofits can take in order to thrive in the coming year. There are two trends that I'm watching in that regard. The first of them is diversification of funding streams. The longtime reliability of federal awards suddenly became a liability instead this past year, leaving many nonprofits grappling with last-minute revenue replacement efforts. And Nicole is going to speak to a little bit of that later, and I'll have some tips for foundation grants. The other big trend I'm seeing relates to what Christine was just telling us about, which is the entry of AI into all aspects of fundraising. And she and I will go over a couple of those things to consider some ways you can capitalize on technology for fundraising. And I'll share my thoughts on that a little bit farther into the program.
Perfect. And so let's kind of get into it. I think starting here with AI and its relation on fundraising is perfect. From my perspective, I think we've really moved from baby steps to big steps with AI this year, especially in the world of fundraising. And that's really what this question is hoping to uncover. So let's bring up the next slide and hear from Derek about this.
Thank you. I think that's a really good way to put it, Carly, moving from baby steps to big steps, or maybe even giant steps. As I think back to 2024, just a year ago, most nonprofits were using AI in their fundraising efforts to draft narratives or revise them, fairly simple stuff. But in 2025, literally every grants database I know introduced an AI widget to help identify potential funders. Candid FDO, GrantStation, Instrumental, even grants.gov on the federal side, despite the federal uncertainty. And of course, some of these tools are better than others. That's always the way it is. The idea behind all of them is to help you find a funder or initiative similar to the one you know and like, but that might be hiding in plain sight. When I think about the big steps we took this year, That makes me think of some of the new programs and platforms like Grantable or Impala, or some of the new tools on existing platforms like Instrumental. These new tools allow users to write entire applications almost at the push of a button. What used to take, say, 2 weeks in the case of a full federal application might now just take minutes or hours. Summaries of vast pools of data that once seemed forbidding to even review can now be extracted and analyzed in seconds. But at the same time, I'll caution these new tools don't solve what I'll call old problems. Your application needs to be accurate. It needs to be compelling. The why us question, why this project question, and why now question. And of course, it also needs to reflect your authentic voice and your unique mission. And it needs to be right. In this sense, it's worth noting that some funders are now also turning to AI. They're using it to identify prospective future grantees, and also in some cases to exclude those whose applications they believe were drafted solely by AI. Christine, what do you think about those developments?
Yeah, I think that brings up a great point about something that we focus on here at YPTC. We call it being human-centric and tech-forward. So as Derek mentioned, AI is now built into a lot of grant databases. It's being built into fundraising platforms too, and fundraising tools. Funders are using it, grant writers are using it. And it can be very helpful, for finding funding, working with your donor data, doing donor outreach, grant writing and reviewing. But it is important to remember when you're doing all of those things, remember the human element. As Derek mentioned, funders are looking for compelling applications, authentic applications, and donors are too. They want to be able to connect with you. And an AI tool just can't talk about your mission and your work in the real passionate human terms the same way that you can. It can't tell the stories of your communities the same way that those folks can themselves. I've even seen some funders prohibiting the use of AI for writing your proposals to make sure that they really hear from you and your voice conveying your values. So AI can be helpful with a lot of the time-consuming tasks involved in fundraising. You might want to be using it more for things like summarizing long documents, doing searches, generating ideas, and then less for narratives and outreach, because that human element is still so important. So just, remember not to edit yourself out of the process.
Absolutely. And I think that kind of speaks to a question that we received in the Q&A is there going to be a standard established for AI and grant writing? Because in ways there's an obsolescence that happens. But I think to what you and Derek are both saying is that human element is all the more important, and staying true to your unique, authentic voice. Don't edit yourself out of the process. You'll hear more on this later and those themes that Christine just brought forward. But Derek, before we go further, another question for you on federal funding. So it's been a big year, and even for our audience as well, they've felt a lot of that as well. Can you speak to what we saw in 2025 and then how we can apply those lessons and events to increase resilience going forward?
Yeah, for sure, Carly. Thanks for that question. It's been quite a year, as you say, and of course our participants today know that full well. Let's bring up the next slide and we'll look at some of the key developments this past year and think about things we can do to thrive in the coming year. And then Nicole is going to develop some of those ideas beyond that. So, nonprofits faced many challenges in the past year. These included executive orders delaying or canceling certain grants and even entire initiatives, and a complete funding freeze. There were new guidelines that insert politics into federal awards, and because of that, raise questions about their reliability. There were revisions that went into effect for uniform guidance, the rules that govern how we manage federal awards, but also an executive order several months later suggesting more changes are coming. There was a new tax and budget bill, OBBBA, which may be a double-edged sword for nonprofits. There was a record-long government shutdown that just ended. And by the way, when it ended, we'd only passed 3 of the 12 necessary full-year appropriations bills. Congress is on its way out of town as we speak. And so the uncertainty is going to continue into 2026. That's one thing we know. But again, I know all of you here today have literally been living through these changes and challenges. So let's look ahead to some strategies for success in 2026. And I'm thinking specifically about the world of federal awards and fundraising. These start with simply embracing the fact that we live in a world defined by change. Focus on the things you could control, as Carly said earlier. For nonprofits seeking federal awards in particular, here's some of the things I think you should know and do. The first relates to deadlines. Pay attention to these because they're coming up more quickly than they used to. Whether it's a shutdown delay or the insertion of new bureaucratic steps, funding opportunities that interest you and that used to get announced months before the due date may be uploaded to grants.gov just days in advance of the deadline and not the weeks or months you're accustomed to. And then even when they're there, the projects to be funded may have shifted focus. Don't assume that a program is going to be the same just because you've applied to it before. It may have completely new criteria for identifying successful applications. In addition, grant sizes may be larger than in the past, but they may not include the indirect costs at levels we're used to seeing. And here, as always, it's really important to read through all of the fine print before deciding to apply. It's also, unfortunately, a fact now that all awards include language allowing them to be terminated by the government for convenience. So understand the risk you may be taking on before you start to spend money. And in a way, this cues up what I like to call the YPTC playbook. There are ways of thinking and acting and focusing your work that may need adjusting or tweaking. We're going to look at some of the more general aspects of nonprofit operations to help our nonprofits thrive in this changed environment. So one of the things I always like to focus on when I'm talking about nonprofits is what I call a nonprofit superpower, and that's the ability to collaborate with sister organizations in your sector or your region, regardless of your size or other factors. Being able to work together brings you shared resources, shared information, and amplified voice. It's a wonderful and important thing to do. The second thing I like to focus on is communicating. Don't hide your light under a basket. You have to communicate with staff, funders, and stakeholders about the challenges you're facing and your plans to meet them or address them. Because in the absence of information, people will come to their own conclusions about what's happening, and those conclusions may not be correct. One of the statistics I love to point out, a survey came out earlier this year showing that only 5% of Americans think they've ever interacted with a nonprofit, only 5%, whereas most of us are born in nonprofit hospitals, go to nonprofit schools, and collaborate with nonprofits our entire lives. There are 12 million people that work for nonprofits. So that figure's wrong, but it's out there. So communicate. Now I'm turning to some of the more general operations and financial operations advice specifically, and I hope Nicole will feel free to jump in here because she's going to be taking on some of these same topics in just a moment to deepen them. If you can, diversify your revenue streams for reliability and stability. I always liken this to a chair. If there's one leg that's shorter or a little bit wobbly, the chair's still not going to fall over right away. my perspective here is balancing the federal funding risk we've been talking about, but Nicole will talk about this more generally in just a moment. And next, I want to turn to scenario planning. Every organization can benefit from scenario planning, where you consider different potential outcomes for your budget expectations. And incidentally, this isn't just an exercise in cutting costs. It can be a way to discover significant upsides in unlocking potential revenues or investing more deeply in your signature programs. And now, moving to the top of my list, it's cash flow. How could it be otherwise for an accounting firm? You have to monitor your cash flow carefully, and you may need to adjust the cadence of the projections that you're creating so that you can keep your finger on the pulse. So again, these are my perspectives for getting through a period of uncertainty in federal funding. But Nicole, as we move into the next poll, I'm getting ready to hand this off to you so you can talk about some strategies for financial operations.
Absolutely. Thank you, Derek. Do you want to introduce the poll first, Carly, and then I'll speak to that?
Perfect. Thank you, Nicole. And thank you, Derek. There were so many practical, applicable insights that you said in there, and I'm excited for Nicole to elaborate. But on that note, we're curious, what steps have you and your organization taken to manage this funding uncertainty? So is it maybe engaging in scenario planning, revenue diversification, increasing the frequency of those cash flow projections? Have you tried all of those? Or maybe you know that they're important, but you don't know where to start. Nicole, any stories or tips that you can start to drop here?
Yeah, no, thank you. And I appreciate that Derek speaks to the scenario planning, revenue diversification, cash flow projections, because these are the things that allow nonprofits to control what they can control. So thought, like an example comes to mind of a client that was struggling with a structural deficit. And we worked with the client to create different scenarios. And through that process, we noticed an opportunity, and they noticed an opportunity that allowed them to generate new revenue. One way was that they were able to sublet a portion of their space to another nonprofit, opening up a different funding line that they hadn't received before. But then also they noticed that one of their programs was underperforming. And so they were able to reallocate the resources from that into one of their other programs that was doing better, and then was able to expand upon that, also generating more revenue. So it's all about opening doors, right? It's these changes allow for nonprofits to open doors that allow them to innovate and diversify their funding strategies. Organizations that are able to adapt quickly allow them to position themselves as leaders in navigating these new funding landscapes that we're going through.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think related to that, like, I love to use AI as a thought partner, something that can help me like bounce ideas around and come up with new ways to think about things. So you can use just basic AI chat tools to help you generate ideas around revenue diversification. What are others in your field, others who serve similar communities doing? Are there areas they're maybe prioritizing that are doing really well or getting more funding or donations? Are there, low cost, higher impact services they're exploring? Really, AI can just help you think about things in different ways and new ways.
Such a good tip. I'm going to go ahead and advance and close the poll now. Taking a look at these results, it looks like most of you are implementing multiple of these little tips, but still almost 10% of you don't really know where to start. So hopefully the next little section with Nicole can give you a launching pad. So yeah, Nicole, I'd love to hear more on what you've seen for trends and what else nonprofits can do to diversify revenue streams and considerations to think about here.
Yeah, thank you, Carly. So let's discuss first a little more closely the key developments from this year. So, as Derek mentioned earlier, the funding shifts happened rapidly, and this resulted in nonprofits having to become more resilient and agile to adapt to those shifts. The idea of assuming the same as last year, unfortunately, doesn't apply as much as it used to. Additionally, there's a heightened focus on the grant reporting and financial tracking. So, this implies how important it is to ensure you are tracking those expenses clearly and consistently. Then, from an organizational point of view, there has been an increase in turnovers. It appears that people are refocusing their personal happiness, which is resulting in more resignations, but also seeing an increase in retirements. And these are typically hitting at that executive level position. But on the flip side, new blood is coming in, and they may or may not have the expertise in the nonprofit background. So let's shift our focus on what this impact is making. So, what is it that nonprofits can control to help in these developments? First, and I'm going to repeat what Derek discussed earlier, it's that scenario planning. Scenario planning allows the organization to be proactive rather than reactive to the shifts. We had a great webinar earlier this year discussing how to do scenario planning. Some of the key takeaways is to be realistic about the scenarios. You want to have 3 of them at a minimum. So you want to have a best case, a worst case, and something in the middle of the road scenarios. And when determining what your revenue and expenses will look like in those scenarios, you have to be realistic. In the best case scenario, you should say to yourself, what is possible, but also what is achievable? Are there different revenue streams that you can consider? In the worst case scenario, you do need to think about, well, if this funding if this particular funding line were cut from our programming, what impact would that have? What expenses would be impacted as a result? Don't only look at this just from generating new revenue or losing revenue perspective. Also think about expenses and what shifts can be made there. And another takeaway is to identify roles and responsibilities. Who will help pull the necessary levers when you're seeing that a certain scenario is coming into play? It's a great way to help mitigate the challenges, but also be able to pivot quickly. Then, with turnover, new blood and new ways of thinking come into the organization. This is really good for any organization because it's fresh eyes and new perspectives. However, it can be hard to adapt to change. But what's important is to ensure overall that the mission and the nuances about nonprofits are discussed and embraced. At YPTC, we can provide training for new board members and clients on the basics of nonprofit accounting. This is one thing to consider to do. Another thing to consider is maybe having a small training to just discuss the culture and the mission that your organization is serving for anyone new who is coming into it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Nicole. That was so good. And you're right, is communicating those nuances, that financial information that is specific to nonprofits can be very tricky while doing it to non-financial stakeholders or even those without nonprofit experience as well. So what are some tips that you have in terms of explaining these concepts in ways that resonate with whether it be incoming staff, like you mentioned in regards to turnover, maybe board members, donors, and even the general public?
Yeah, this is a great question, right? How do we communicate it? I'm an accountant through and through. I'll fully admit it. I love numbers. I can understand the meaning behind them, but I can also recognize that not everyone can do the same. So how do we explain these concepts? And so first, kind of going back to that turnover rate and people looking inside of themselves, I am seeing more people from the for-profit world joining nonprofits. And I think that's absolutely incredible. But there is a learning curve, and we discussed some of the ideas earlier before to help ensure that the mission continues to be met. Also, it's important to discuss those nuances about nonprofits. And so one thing comes to mind is the overhead myth. The overhead should not be a scary word. It's a necessary and vital expense to the organization to help run it. So there's a great webinar that's coming up tomorrow and one that was done earlier this year too. But I suggest definitely checking that out. But also if you're considering to diversify your revenue and and going into different areas, think about how that'll help with the nonprofits as well. But another example is I've seen like more collaboration. So as a result, if you are considering like doing that, I've seen nonprofits create another entity that's a for-profit entity that helps them expand their mission. I've also seen some mergers and fiscal sponsorships. But whatever the case you decide that you want to do, you want to make sure that you are seeking outside counsel from lawyers or from your auditors. But it's definitely important that you're including them in these discussions so that you can help yourself be proactive on the changes that you're looking forward to. But another thought is when presenting the information, it can't just be about the numbers on a page. You have to think about different ways of how to present it. Data visualization speaks extremely well to everyone, using graphs and charts to help get the point across. There was a great course we did on this a little while ago as well, but it's just about how can you present it in a clear way so that others are able to digest it. And also make sure that you're leveraging the technology tools that are available. We're speaking about AI and how more prevalent it is now. This can be an extremely great thought partner on it. And Christine, I'm curious, from your point of view, how do you see AI playing a factor in how we present financial information?
Yeah, I mean, I love to use AI as a thought partner, especially for things like this, like trying to communicate financial information, complex financial concepts that can be difficult to understand, or maybe something that is new to your audience, like accrual accounting. Like a board member might say, I know we got that grant money, but why don't I see it on the financials? Or like your ED might say, okay, can we afford to launch this new program? Do we have the resources to sustain it for at least a few years? AI can really be great at helping you compile all of your information and put the results in accessible terms that really anyone can understand. It can help you figure out the best way to do that for that specific type of information, the specific audience. Will a visual be really helpful in this case? And then what kind of visual? AI can make it for you or show you how to make a really nice version. And I suggest really thinking intentionally about the output you want, who your audience is, what you need them to do with this information. Give all that context to the AI when you're making your request to get more useful results. Like tell it, I need a clear decision to come out of this. So then, it'll help you generate results that can help you get that. And the more purposeful and intentional you can be around what you're asking for and, having your goals in mind, the better result you'll get. It's really similar to how you would make a request to a colleague also. You're going to get better work out of them if you tell them everything around the situation and everything you need. Relatedly, I do want to emphasize the importance of humans in this process. Know your audiences and your mission best. So to whatever degree you do use AI to help you, don't forget to review, to edit, and make sure things make sense for you and for your needs.
Thank you, Christine. I love that. The context and then also just the importance of humans. And Nicole, thank you so much for sharing those practical tips and what you've seen too. I want to underline the professional help for those legal and structural changes, even as it relates to diversifying your revenue. In fact, you joined us for a Uncovering UBI webinar earlier this year where we talked all about the implications of diversifying revenue and what that might look like in terms of unrelated business income. So check that out as well. And we will be moving forward to our third poll question. So we're curious which statement best describes your organization's current approach to AI. We've discussed a lot about it so far today, and Christine will be taking us through it even more, but where are you and your organization at in terms of AI policy, AI usage? And as we are waiting for responses to come in, Christine, any initial thoughts, or maybe even we can address some questions from the Q&A as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's really important to have guidelines or a policy in place, and especially training when you're using AI or encouraging it to be used at your organizations, because you want to be able to give people, especially like the more innovative people, like room to explore. And you also want to provide guardrails, like protect the adventurous and reassure the cautious. That's really what these policies and guidelines can help with. And I think there was a question earlier about like, are there nonprofit specific AI tools? And like we had mentioned a few around nonprofit specific tasks like grant writing. But for the tools themselves, we've seen folks use like, everything that's out there, Claude, Gemini, Copilot, ChatGPT, all of the things, and, just play around with it and see what works for you, what makes sense for you, but also, if you're looking for more data security organization-wide, like if you are a Microsoft shop, like use the enterprise-wide license for Copilot, or if you're a Google shop, use the enterprise-wide license for Gemini, and that can also be really helpful.
Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And we've got a pretty mixed bag over here. Some, it looks like most people are using AI tools ad hoc, but the policy is more in development. I feel maybe that's probably pretty indicative of people at large as, just all over the board, really.
Yep, that sounds about right. Yeah, I think a lot of people are in various stages.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, let's continue on here. So in our past webinar with AI, one of my favorite things that was covered was just the considerations for implementing AI, kind of bringing this awareness into that space. And so for nonprofits, what are some of the biggest considerations that they should keep in mind when implementing it?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, just make sure that you are being really intentional with your use of AI and similar tech tools. And, aside from policy or guidelines, or really something that can help you develop your policy and guidelines is before you start using these tools, ask yourself, does this tool really help us serve our community better? And if so, how? Like if that tool doesn't clearly support your mission, then you might want to reconsider using it. Think about, does it really help you improve your outreach? Does it help reduce your costs, enhance your transparency to your community? Does it really offer support to you in ways that are valuable to you and to your organization? And obviously before that, you are going to want to be really clear within your organization and probably externally as well. What are your values? Like, what are your core values and what do you really want to consider when you're evaluating these tools? I think overall, it's also really important to consider where you are in your organization about having AI help you really advance your mission versus having people do that. So for every organization, that's going to be a little bit different. But I'll just say again, like, don't edit yourself out of the process and remember, the purpose of your work, remember the human side of things. And so like an additional thing that can help with all of this is having a tech policy that's in line with your organization's mission and your values. And, you can ask AI, you can have a chat with an AI tool to kind of get you started on that. Just ask it for ideas, but this can include things like, all right, there will be no sharing of sensitive data with any AI tool without consent. Everything that comes out of AI is going to be reviewed by a human being. We're going to avoid anything that promotes bias or promotes any kind of misinformation, avoid anything that creates barriers to accessibility, any of those kinds of considerations that can really help ensure that you are aligning your tech with your mission and values.
So important. Now let's talk about what everyone always wants to know is how can nonprofits actually use AI? And I really consider myself lucky to be able to learn from you, Christine, and the rest of our tech team, though regardless of all of the resources around me, where I've personally found the most growth is simply just using it, trying it out, right? Testing it on small tasks. But can you speak a little bit to some of the practical ways that nonprofits are using AI to improve financial management and operations?
Yeah. Before I get into this, actually, I do just want to reiterate that, it is really important to not edit yourself out of this process, especially when you're using AI to help with communication and reports that are going out to funders or outreach updates going out to your community. You want to be really purposeful and intentional and not forget about you and your audience as human beings. Because that's what nonprofits are here to do is help human beings and strengthen those personal connections and support. And so that said, there are tons of ways that you can kind of get started or that people are already using AI. As Derek mentioned, to help write grant proposals and grant reports. And as we said before, some funders are now saying, we're not going to accept proposals that were prepared by using AI. So that, again, is a good reminder that, the human element is an important part of the process. Your voice is still so important. But even if you're not using AI to help write these documents, you can use it to help you copy edit, to help generate ideas, to make suggestions, like, well, what would you want to see if you were this funder? Again, just use it as a thought partner. Especially, when you have writer's block and you're like, I know what I do, but how do I really talk about this in a way that'll be effective and attractive? And we've noticed some funders are using AI to help review grant proposals as they come in, take the first pass and tell them, was this written by AI? And 2, does this meet our minimum criteria? Some folks are also using it for the things that take a lot of time and a lot of mental bandwidth. This is where it can really help reduce your stress and your workload, like reviewing contracts, agreements, RFPs, summarizing data or extracting guidance from CFR 200, reviewing your internal policies and procedures, really helping to put these things in understandable language and helping you to give attention to what's important. Another really easy one is just giving you meeting notes and next steps. AI can do a really good job with that and pull the most important parts from your conversations out. That's generally a low risk way to get started if you're maybe a little more nervous about starting to use AI. And a lot of folks are using it in these low risk ways, but where AI can really start to be useful is where you're reworking your internal processes and workflows to build AI in as a helpful tool. You're not just adding it on, but you're making it part of your process. You can use AI to help you look for trends in your donor data, your financial data. It can tell you what events make us the most new connections every year. That end up being people who come back as volunteers or recurring donors. What are some ways we can increase our outreach with limited resources, limited people, limited time? And how can AI even take on some of that work and be part of your regular processes and save your team some time and some stress? You can ask AI for ideas about how it can help you, give it your specific context and just have it help you think through that. And then again, there's a lot of AI tools showing up in all of our different software, like accounting systems, payroll, bill pay, everything you already use. It's helping to make those a little bit more effective and efficient. with, financial categorization of transactions, donor segmentation. And I do want to say again, the human review and human input is still very necessary here. And, you're just going to continue to evaluate that yourself on a case-by-case basis.
There's so many practical tips in there, Christine. And the one I really like that you shared is asking AI how it can help you too, providing the context, providing what you're doing, and asking it to find efficiencies that you might not have seen before. So we'll move forward really now. Yeah, absolutely. And we are curious too. We're getting lots of questions in the chat, but we're also curious to know what you have used AI for. So feel free to drop what you've used AI for in the Q&A as well. We'd love to kind of hear your ideas too. That brings us to our final poll, and we're currently working on our webinar content for 2026. So we are curious what topics you would like us to cover in 2026. And I know that it says select up to 3, but you will only be able to choose 1. So if you do have other selections that you'd like us to see and focus on next year, put those in the Q&A as well, or in your evaluation feedback. Your feedback really is important to us. And yeah, we'd love to bring you content that you're looking for. So if you cannot see the poll question, please make sure you refresh your web browser and check the Q&A as well, because we like to help you guys out with those answers. And Christine, I'd love to kind of go through a few questions with you as we're waiting for responses here that came in while you were talking. And I know one thing is we have that How AI is Changing Automation webinar linked in the related content widget. That's a great place to look at, privacy risks and kind of get a good basic there. But what other where to start guidance can you share about getting started when creating a closed source AI for an organization?
Again, I'll say if you are already using Microsoft 365, consider signing up with their enterprise version for Copilot, and that will make sure that all of your information is contained within your internal system. And as always, read all the fine print, get legal advice if you need to. The most important thing I can probably say here is a lot of these tools will automatically opt you in to having your data used to help them train the tools and things like that. So do your due diligence and make sure that you are opting out of those, especially if you're going to have sensitive data in these systems or anything like that. But yeah, I would definitely read that fine print.
Yeah, privacy is and data security is such a big consideration. All right, I'm going to close the poll now and move on and kind of look at this. I'm going to come back to that feedback later after this and definitely use that in determining our 2026 calendar. So make sure you're subscribed to our updates and that you stay on top of these webinars, because as you can tell, we're bringing a lot of really good information. But I'm also loving seeing some of these ideas of how you guys are using automation and AI and improving communication to boards and ensuring the financial statements agree with the narrative, Copilot and Excel for charts, graphs, and data summaries, training development, all sorts of good stuff. So as we kind of close up here, and we'll hopefully have a few moments at the end to address some of these questions that just came in as well. Derek and Christine and Nicole, can you provide just a kind of a look ahead? What's your biggest piece of advice for nonprofits as they go forward from here?
Yeah, I can go ahead and get started. So in the next year, we'll really see AI everywhere. We will all be using it. If you're not already using it, you definitely will be. It's going to be in all our tools and software and devices in both our professional and personal lives. And also, like, that can be kind of a good way to get started. Like, if you're a little bit distrustful or a little bit scared of AI, start small and with like low risk personal tasks, like having it help you with a grocery list, or like putting together side by side comparisons of a kitchen appliance, or finding something to do in your area over the holidays. Like, practice prompting the AI and building in specific context to get more tailored results. Like, this will be for a group of people, including 2 kids under 10. We would like to be indoors and we want to be within an hour of our house, all of that. As you practice, you'll probably get more comfortable with it, more comfortable with like how to get the results that you want, and it'll be easier to use it at work. And then again, start using it with low risk areas like generating topic lists, generating agendas, summarizing a funding opportunity you found, finding funding opportunities, drafting messages, anything where solid, real, great output would be fantastic, but it doesn't need to be perfect. And, as we just talked about, as AI is entering everywhere, we do want to be careful about data security, and we do want to make sure to use these tools responsibly. So that does involve creating that tech policy around your values, around your mission, and pilot anything before you really want to scale it. Test it out on small, low-risk projects first, and make sure you're training your people, training your volunteers and your staff, anyone that's going to be using it, and define like what is acceptable use for our organization. Define when should humans jump in and review the results. And then again, asking yourselves, how does this serve our mission and our community? And all of this will, evolve with AI, and it will evolve with your values too. So just keep reviewing and keep revising as you go.
Thank you for that, Christine. I think from my perspective, how we use scenario planning as a tool for this year, I see a different strategic tool for next year, and that's succession planning. I do think that retirements will continue without a doubt into 2026, and it's really important to think about succession planning. Some of the initial key factors to consider is like, first, what are the critical roles in your organization? And, assess and think about like what would happen if somebody did leave from that position? How would it impact the organization? But then think about too, like, what internal talent exists already, assess them, and what can you do to help develop them to aid them in their own future leadership positions within your organization. And then 3, it's really good to put pen to paper. It's one thing to talk about it, but put that transition plan in place. It's again going back to how can you be proactive and think ahead to some of these things. It's like, we don't want to think about it. You don't want to think about somebody who's been with the organization for 15 years or 20 years, but it's really important to put your mind into that mindset. But then it's also important to just finally communicate it to the necessary stakeholders in your organization, like the board or, other executive level positions that would be impacted as a result of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Derek, you want to wrap us up with some key takeaways from the federal funding and grant fundraising?
I think I want to pile on to what Nicole was just saying, particularly that last point about communication. I said a few moments ago, we know that the federal funding uncertainty will continue into 2026. That's simple fact because 9 of 12 appropriations bills haven't been passed yet. So we don't know what the full federal budget looks like. We do know things are taking longer. So what are we going to do? We're going to engage in scenario planning. We're going to engage in diversifying revenue streams beyond government awards and look to foundation grants and corporate grants and individual giving. And the key to all of that, in my mind, is communication. And I mean happy, uplifting, positive communication about the great work that your nonprofit does. Nonprofits exist to solve problems in society or improve society. And Americans need and rely on and want the goods and services that nonprofits create. But studies have shown they're not sure what nonprofits are. And there's a lot of negative news about nonprofits in the media. So I want to counter that by telling people what it is you do, why it's important, and how it's impacting your neighborhood, your city, your region, your state, or maybe a different group of stakeholders. Take pride in the great things you do and tell people about them. Something like 80% of all funding decisions are made by individuals. So this goes beyond individual giving, it goes into foundation giving and corporate giving. People need to hear about what it is you do. And although there's been a lot of chatter about changes to tax law and what deductions can be taken at what levels and floors and ceilings and so forth, I think the fact is most Americans give to an organization because they value its mission, they believe it has impact, and they believe it's transparently run and with a lot of integrity. And I want to assume that all of the nonprofits joining us here today are doing exactly those things. So share that good message. You have to tell your funders, your stakeholders, your staff, and your board the good things you're doing, and also tell them what you need. Not everyone can respond by writing a check or making a grant, but tell them what you need to succeed. And hopefully that help you develop some good steps forward.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you so much. Yes, shine your light, everyone. Shine your light and take pride in what you and your organization are doing. All right, so we will wrap up for CPE purposes, but if you can stay on with us and hear a few question answers, we will spend probably 10 or so minutes doing that right now. Happy holidays to everyone who has to drop. Thank you so much for being with us today. And yeah, we're just so grateful for your engagement and your participation here. So I'm just looking back through some of the questions that we have. And the first one I'd like to go back to, Nicole, is for you. It was kind of speaking to that, cash management, scenario planning, cash flow forecasting. And they're wondering, is there a standard way to start that or to report that? Is there, I guess, how does one start?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, the easiest way to start is with your budget. You have a budget, whatever it is that it may be for that year, start with that, and then build upon the scenarios or the cash flow projections or whatever the case might be from that. So I guess using like the example of like a rolling forecast, you start with what you thought your plan was going to be for that year. Break it down into each month of like, when do you think certain revenue streams are going to hit? When do you think certain expenses are going to hit? So that you can kind of see it on a month-to-month basis over a full year. But then every month you should be looking ahead and making adjustments as necessary. Oh, I thought the Ford grant was going to come in December, but now it's going to hit in January. Or, oh, we had to move our gala. It's not going to be in June next year. It's now going to be in October next year. So like, what are the expenses impact around that? But just start with your budget. Keep it simple. Keep it with like your main expenses, your main revenues. You don't have to go super deep on it to just kind of get into an initial thought around it.
I love that. Yeah, start simple. Thank you, Nicole.
Start simple. No problem.
Christine, we have gotten so many questions around AI tools, policies. So maybe we can start with one I'm seeing here about any sort of AI tool recommended to help digest, display key financial information, maybe using dashboarding. I know that data visualization is something that we like to use with our clients a lot here. Anything you want to share on that?
I mean, a lot of accounting systems are starting to have AI tools built into them that can help create dashboards and create reporting for you. And you basically tell it what you want to see or what result you want to get out of it. Like, are you looking to find out how much cash you will have left at the end of the year? Are you looking for the board to make a decision around something? And it can kind of help recommend, what kind of visuals or what kind of tables or numbers it should show, and then it can usually generate that for you. Depending on the tool that you're using, also, like the built-in ones are better, but then regular chat tools, some of them are not great at developing data visualizations on their own. They'll produce something that's kind of clunky looking, or might look like a chart we created in Excel in the 90s. And if you want to make it prettier, you can always ask the tool for like directions. Okay, how do I make this chart? And it'll tell you like step by step how to build it yourself. And there are tons of other programs that we use. But yeah, I would always start with the internal tools that are already built into your financial system, because they already have your data and it's all secure within that system also.
That makes sense. Kind of a follow-up question that I think piggybacks off of what you just said really well is, what about an organization who's preparing lengthy financial reports for their boards to read? We kind of talked about this earlier, right? Is like communicating that financial information to those who probably aren't reading all the dozens of pages that go into these reports. So what's your best solution or advice to provide to someone to really get that important information to someone who won't, who has limited time to review it?
Yeah. And I think like at YPTC, we see that all the time, especially with board members. Like people are pressed for time, and, they have full-time jobs, and they're often, not able to pay as much attention to lengthy reports as we would want them to. I find the best way is just focus on one thing, maybe two things. But you really want to like have people hone in on 1 or 2 points. If before you even start preparing a package, like don't necessarily prepare the same package every month. You really just need your basic financials, your income statement, your balance sheet, your cash flow, and then maybe a couple of supplementals if you want every month. But additionally, like your executive summary should change every month based on what is the most important thing for the board to know that happened this month. Or what's the most important thing for them to do this month, or what's the most important thing for them to decide. And then based on that, you create your visuals, or you create your executive summary, or you create, whatever report you want to show them that information. But you really, it helps to distill all of that information down and get people to focus.
Mm-hmm.
Christine, a related point is, even when board members have the time, they may not have the financial background. So looking at a page of numbers may mean nothing to them. Nicole said she can read through those and see the story immediately. Not everybody can. So distilling that point, as you say, maybe it's through a cover memo. Maybe it's through a visual analysis of the financials. There are ways to share that information. It's so important, but don't just assume that everybody knows how to read a page of numbers.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. All right. And just a few last questions in here, really. And so thank you all for those who are still with us. But Christine, I think we'll kind of round it out, kind of joining these together is in terms of that AI policy procedure, where do you recommend people start, especially those smaller organizations who don't have the bandwidth to really dive into and explore these topics and have a team like our YPTC tech team to do the research for us? So is there a template for policies and procedures for AI and especially in terms of creating that closed source AI?
Yeah, I mean, there are a bunch of templates out there. Like if you ask an AI chat tool or if you Google it, it'll come up with a bunch of results. But also, if you have an existing like cybersecurity policy or an existing policy around any of the software or tech you use, that's usually a very good starting point. You may find that a lot of it can cover your use of AI as well, or maybe some of it like implicitly covers your use of AI. So just take a step back and evaluate what you already have, and that can be really, really useful.
Amazing. Well, Christine, Derek, Nicole, thank you guys so much for sharing, for holding for all of this, for involving your expertise. And thank you to everyone who was with us today. We're so grateful for your feedback, for your thoughts, for your questions. That's all the questions we had in our Q&A today. So we hope you have an amazing rest of the week and rest of the year. We'll see you tomorrow in our overhead webinar. And if not, we'll see you next year as well. So thank you so much, and enjoy your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.